Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker Podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week, I spoke to makeup effects artist Rob Burman. Rob has worked on some absolute classics like John Carpenter's The Thing, Terminator 2, Batman Returns, Tremors, The Goonies, and Ghostbusters. I talked to him about his incredible career and his advice for new people entering the industry. Enjoy. So I just wanted to jump straight into it. So you've worked on some really good movies. Um,
Yeah.
Before we talk about those, can you tell me a bit about how you got into the industry in the first place?
I'll give you the essential Berman story. My grandfather, my dad's dad, he was an artist in the Midwest and United States and things, and he sculpted monuments and things like that, and lots of like the seal for the city and all that kind of thing. So they then he decided that he would move to California and think, well, maybe they could use my talents. Maybe I could sculpt for films or whatever like that. This is the late 1930s, um, and, and they so they moved to California, and one of his earliest jobs was sculpting the head of a cane, which is what they used in the Wolfman, the silver-headed cane to kill the Wolfman with. So on that, he met Jack Pierce, who was doing the Wolfman makeup, and Jack was a fabrication guy. He just glued stuff to you and made it look good. Whereas my grandfather, he was a sculptor, fine artist. He made molds. He built props, did scenic art, all that kind of thing. And so Jack said, "Well, you don't tell anybody. I'll keep you busy." Then my grandfather's like, "Well, that's fine," because my grandfather was very quiet and to himself, and so he would make things like after that, all of the what ended up being kind of the bad rubber masks of Frankenstein and the Mummy and all that for
Mm,
all the sequels, all of those things. My grandfather made those things for Jack
wow.
Pierce, who went on and did the shows. He ended up doing things like the Abbott and Costello Meet the Monsters movies and stuff like that. So he got involved with that. Well, while my father was growing up around all that on the summers, he was kind of forced to work in my grandfather's shop as an assistant, help him clean molds and all that kind of stuff. So my grandfather grew up or my father grew up in that environment. Then when he was just getting out of the Marine Corps, and he's 20, 21 years old, they had me, and my mom and all of that. He got an apprenticeship at 20th Century Fox in the makeup department because he was working at Dawn Post with my grandfather, sculpting a giant King Kong sculpture. And they told him, well, they're having an apprenticeship over at Fox. You might as well go over there and check it out. And so my dad took Friday off and went down there and applied on Friday. And on Monday, he started. He and three other applicants out of 100 guys, only those three got picked. And
Wow.
so they started doing their apprenticeship. Well, about 6 months into the apprenticeship, they start Ben Nye, the department head, comes in and said, "Oh my God, we got a giant film coming in, oh tremendous things, it's going to revolutionize the industry, we got to do it, we got to get the best guys in the world." And they started throwing names around and stuff like that, and my father suggested John Chambers. John Chambers got brought in. You know how to get a hold of him? Yeah, God, bring him in. Okay, so he came in and he interviewed and talked to Ben Nye, and he came out with the script and looked at my dad and he said, "We're going to win an Oscar, boy." And it was Planet of the Apes.
Wow.
He did.
Yeah.
And so my dad finished off his apprenticeship over the next 3 years, working on all the Apes movies and things like that were being done. And then after that, he and John Chambers went and started their own shop together outside of the studio system. Well, nobody was successful doing that back then, except for a few departments, cameras, lighting, things like that. They had their own companies and whatnot. So but for a makeup company to go out and start on its own was kind of unheard of. What nobody knew was they had a contract with the CIA, and
Oh,
they were
right.
doing things that they couldn't show the studios that they were doing.
Mm,
So they had to have a private facility, and so that was that way for a few years, and then he and John parted. John retired, and my dad continued with the Berman Studios, what it was called after that. And when I graduated high school, I kind of went in there and said, "Hey, I'll clean your shop at night." And I would clean it at night and get everything done and all that stuff. And then the next day he'd come in and freak out, and he'd call the school, and the school would have to page me to the front office, and I'd get to the office and he'd be like, "Where is this? Where's that? I need this thing. That's here, it's there. I never saw it. I don't know," whatever it was. And then he'd say, "Come in after school." So I started coming in after school. And then when I graduated, they were in the middle of projects, so I just stayed. And then I was full time. Next thing you know, I was kind of the foreman of the place because I was the only one that knew where anything was. And so after a few years there, I was getting laid off, and my dad says, "Well, I got a phone call. They want to talk to you over here at this on this show." And I said, "Okay, great." So I went over and I interviewed and got the job running foam latex for The Thing.
Mm.
And I'm like, "Well, I guess this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Sounds like
Not
a good idea. I think
yeah.
I'll do this for a while."
Yeah, not a bad
You
place to
know,
start as well on The
yeah,
Thing.
yeah,
Um,
not at all.
that's nuts. The one I was going to talk about first was the Mario Brothers movie, and I've
Uh-huh.
got you down as prosthetic makeup designer. So what does that mean exactly, and what did you design on the movie?
To be honest, what I did in the film is probably only on screen for about less than 20 seconds.
Oh, really?
Um,
Nuts.
we do the end sequence that kills King Koopa from the
Yeah.
time that Dennis Hopper gets his smile prosthetic where he morphs into that. And then he morphs into the next character, which is a different actor, with the big teeth and all that stuff that gets blown up into the cement bucket. And then the two different stages of heads come out of there, a third stage and a fourth stage that are all radio controlled puppets.
Mm.
So that was my contribution. Vincent Gaustini did all the other prosthetic work on the
Yeah.
show. Who was at Makeup and Effects Labs did the Goombas and the little
Mm.
rat creatures and stuff like that. And Mark Maitre and Dave Nelson did the Yoshi character, which is just everybody brought their A game on that show. I think everybody but the directors. Nothing.
Yeah. And so you've got your Rob Burman Laboratories course that you run where you teach
Sure.
people prosthetics. What's the main thing that you teach your students? What's kind of the most important thing you tell them?
And again, it's the thing I talk about when they first walk into class. The first thing I say is, I got to teach you how to see, to be able to, because we all know what a face looks like, right? Okay, so if I give a guy some clay and say, "Make me a nose," he should be able to make me a nose, right? Why does it always look like an airplane tail with fins and stuff on it? Why is it always? And what people realize is they've been looking at things their whole life and don't really know what they look like.
Mm. Mm.
And so to teach them that, if I can teach them that, that's worth the price of the course in and of itself.
Yeah.
You know. So and but in learning to see, they're learning also, okay, in sculpting a character, how to make that character look like the character and not just look like a monkey poked clay.
Yeah.
And anybody who's not played with clay in their life and comes into my class, I end up getting them something that will probably suffice, but they learn really fast that they really don't know what things look like.
Mm. Mm.
So I think that's single most important. And then I focus on technique. I focus
Yeah.
on, what because the end result is one thing, but getting there is everything. 80% of the job is making molds and sculpting and cleaning, casting parts and casting urethane and rubber and silicone and doing all that lab tech stuff. The beginning of the job is sculpting. Yeah, great. Okay, so you get a few days if you're lucky to sculpt. And then the end of the job is maybe you get a day to paint because everything in the middle took so long that you've only got just enough time and you're painting it as it's going into the box.
Mhm.
It's like, so those guys that want to paint and sculpt, that's all great, but 80% of the job is technical. It's, lab tech stuff. And if you don't know how to do that, you're not going to work on most of the job. You'll work in the beginning and then you'll be laid off. And then you'll
Mm.
work at the end for a day. But otherwise, the guy who comes in as the mold maker, he's usually brought in for the life casts up front. So if that's the case, then he's also going to be around while they're sculpting. Molly's prepping for all that, so maybe they might even ask him to help them sculpt. Then he's going to be making all the molds and all of that, and casting parts with the foam technicians and all that stuff, and the figure finishers and all those people. You're going to be on that job from the beginning to the end if you know how to do that middle 80%.
Mm. Mm.
Otherwise, you don't work much.
Yeah. And what about apart from the technical and the artistry of it, what are the
Mhm.
sort of personal attributes you think you need personality wise to work in that industry?
Well, yeah, I know got to really love what this is. You got to really love doing it because that's, you're going to spend all your time doing it. When you get a job half the time, especially, I'll use this one job I did as an example back in the 1980s when I was talking to a guy for almost a year about doing his film. And okay, that's great. Just let me know when you got the money. Let me know when you got the money. That's great. That's fine. And then at the end of a year, he's like, okay, here's a check for $45,000. I'll see you in Africa in 6 weeks with a monster. Uh, yeah, okay, sure you will. And then all of a sudden you realize your ass is on the line for that kind of money to show up with something that's shootable, not just, I mean, we only make rubber monsters, but it can't look like a rubber monster, you know.
Yeah.
So that's really critical is being able to deliver.
Yeah. And just going back to the thing. So what did you say you did on that? Your foam?
I
You
was the
described.
foam latex department. My best friend and I, who after leaving my dad's shop, we went over to Rob Bottin's, and basically they just gave us the whole department because nobody else wanted to do it. So we
Right.
kind of were the first guys to establish that process as its own department. It
Mm.
was usually, yeah, whoever's not busy, just go run the foam, you know. But then they never got good quality. They never got all consistency and all of that. And then once it came in and Dale and I started, we made it a department.
Mm.
So,
And that film in particular has got some real just horrific special effects in it.
absolutely,
What did you think, seeing those things getting put together? What was your impression of it? Because that's pretty, I mean, at that time as well, it's kind of
well, when we were doing
revolutionary.
it, none of us had ever seen anything like that. So we were looking at it going, yeah, I don't know. I hope it works. We'll see. And we tested the hell out of everything, all kinds of stuff. But Rob Bottin was brilliant mind who came up with so many ideas to do so many different things. And like I said, not all of us were sold on it. Some of us were like, well, we hope it works out and looks good. I can't imagine what the movie is going to be like. But after seeing the movie, I think that of all of the films up to that time in the history of film, um, it's the best, most iconic effect sequences ever done without a computer.
Mm, mm. And they still hold
And
up.
even with a computer, they really haven't done it better. They've just kind of copied the same.
Mm. Yeah, I'd
So
agree with
I
that.
feel really honored to have been one of the guys contributing to what to me is the sequence where Charles Hallahan starts to have his heart attack and all the stuff happens and the arms get bit off and his head stretches off and everything's on fire and the spider head's going and it is the most amazing sequence on film.
Mm,
I don't think anybody's done a better one.
mm. Yeah, no, it's a great movie, really good movie. Um, another film I saw pop up on your Facebook feed was some work you'd done on Batman Returns.
Mm-hmm.
So what was you up to on that?
I was brought in because they brought a team from England to do everything here in
Hmm.
California. California, and they didn't have enough people, so they had a coordinator who was local from here, and she went around searching out people that were good lab technicians, good mold makers, good people like that. So they brought me in at first to do um, mold making on all the Danny DeVito stuff.
Hmm.
He's wearing a full body suit, a prosthetic thing underneath, and underneath his clothing and all of that. There was originally going to be a nude scene of him getting out of a bathtub,
Oh,
but
nice.
I guess they didn't do it. Um, but so I did full body molds off of Danny DeVito's body and things like that, and lots of parts, cast his undersuit things that went into his costume. Um, and then when all of that was kind of completed, they moved me on, and I did fine finishing where I fixed imperfections in the castings of the Batman costume, the Catwoman costume, and anything else Penguin related.
Mm.
You know, anything we did in the shop would come by if there were little bubbles or cracks or seams and things like that. I fixed all that stuff in the suits before they got fabricated and assembled.
And I'm making an assumption that you love that kind of genre of movie, these kind of genre movies. Is that true, or am I just making the assumption and it's the effects that you like doing?
You know, it's what's really funny is my favorite movies in the entire world are mostly animated.
Oh,
I
really?
think The Incredibles is probably the best film ever. You know,
Right, right, okay.
I love Pixar. I love a lot of that. Um, I love just pure entertainment. What the subject matter or what the method that they use to achieve is not as important to me.
Mm,
But the kid in me does like animation, stop
mm,
motion, all of that kind of thing. Um, I tend to steer away from these days anyway, anything traumatic,
right.
you
Okay.
know.
So,
It's just doesn't feed me as a person and make me feel good. It makes me feel icky, you know.
okay, but you've contributed to years of trauma with the thing that
Oh yeah,
still haunts
I'll
me.
tear your damn head off. I'll rip your guts out. I'll do everything all over the place, you know. But if I see a drop of blood, I'm going, oh.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Talking of movies for kids, well, kids, teenagers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers film. So
Yeah.
what did you do on that? You did costume as well as was it kind of molding everything or?
They over a period of time, piece by piece, gave us the entire Ranger costume.
Mm,
So, you know, we first asked us if we could make helmets, and then they were like, "Well, but you can make costumes, right? So you can make like an undersuit, right?" And it's like, "Well, yeah." Oh, but you can make this. Can you do the gauntlets? Can you do? And they just gave it to us. Can you do a belt? Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. You know, so we ended up doing everything the Rangers head to toe.
mm,
They supplied us a couple of things, like they supplied us the fabric that we had to use to make them because they already had huge bolts of that manufactured ahead of time.
mm.
Um, they gave us the white leather gloves that were their gloves because they were super nice, little made out of kit leather, and they gave us the boots because I don't remember, was it Nike, Reebok, whoever
Right.
it was, actually made the boots themselves. But
Right.
we detailed them, painted them, altered them, and made them the Rangers boots, not just, you know, big white boots.
Yeah. And do you get when you're building that up, what do you get? Does somebody do a sketch and go, right, this is what it's got to look like exactly? Or are you following a what pattern? What's the
The whole film started with a different director, a friend
mm,
of mine, Steve Wang, who's a brilliant director, brilliant artist. He designed so many things in the 80s. He's, you know, the guy.
mm,
Anyway, he started on that, and we ended up seeing these drawings that production had give us, and they looked like, I'll call it bubble armor,
mm,
you know, like round, very anime, very, you know, but cumbersome and not real, not mobile. These guys would never be able to fight in them and things like that. And you know, and Steve came in and looked at, we had body casts of two stuntmen. They wouldn't give us the actors because they were working all day on the TV show. So we started building the suits on stuntmen, and we started to sculpt it, and Steve came in, and we were like, this just doesn't really work. It's not. And he's like, no, they should be like this thick. They should be thin, and they should look like Ferraris. And I went, okay, let me see what I can do. And then a week later, Steve was out of the project, and we were getting a new director, but they just left me to go to design the suit the way I thought it was, most appropriate. And I tried to keep as true to any of the input that they gave me and whatnot and all that. But ultimately, they needed to be able to fight and move because the undersuit fabric that they gave us wasn't going to let them do that either. It was very stiff and difficult to move in, and and whatnot. So there were a lot of difficulties and problems on making superheroes is hard.
I bet it is. I bet it
It
is.
is the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's as hard as gluing a nose in the middle of your face and making it look real.
Mm.
It takes that much effort, and everything has to be polished and perfect, and the slightest imperfection just shows.
Mm.
So it took us 3.5 months to make 36 suits, 42 helmets, and God knows how many power coins and chest emblems, belts and whatnot.
And I'm assuming there's toys of those suits that you made. There must have been. Yeah. So did you get a piece of the money from the toys then? It doesn't work like that then, unfortunately.
No. And if they had set me up ahead of time, say we want you to make the suits and design them, that would have been in my contract.
I bet it would, yeah.
Because they piecemealed it to me a little bit at a time, it was hard to be able to say that. I didn't, oh, I'm only doing this piece. I'm only doing this piece. And then all of a sudden it's done. You're like, wow, you know what? I did all of that. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough
When they
one.
first came out with the toys, they were the old toys repainted to look like our toys. So
oh really? Oh right. Oh, that's
it was
cheap.
much later that they actually came out with a set that was our original design.
So another one that pops up, because I'm obviously Facebook stalking you now, is Ghostbusters. But huge movie, tons and tons of effects in that movie, especially for that year.
My favorite live action movie that I worked on ever.
Oh really? What do you remember from that film?
Again, all we did was the foam latex like we did on The Thing. It was, again, my same best friend and partner at the time, Dale Brady. I think what happened is one of the guys, Stuart Ziff, who was running the shop for everybody, said, asked around and said, well, who's the foam latex guy? We need a foam latex guy. And, the people that they already had were people that I knew, and I was pretty much the only one at the time. So they called me, and I brought Dale in, and the two of us headed the department doing all that. It was, if we thought the stuff we did on The Thing was big, Ghostbusters was bigger. The Thing, our biggest thing, took 5 20-quart mixers to fill the biggest body, the end result, what did they call him? I don't know. It was the Blair Monster. That's what it was. Anyway, in Ghostbusters, the average thing took 3 to 5 mixers to fill. Just the body of the terror dogs. It was just monstrous, and Slimer, who we called Onion Head at the time, was just monstrous amounts of foam. And the thing is, we only cast each of them maybe 3 times because I'm good, but but because it worked well enough that we used what we made, and it was capable and performed what they wanted it to. So we only made what we needed.
Yeah.
And giant shop full of cables running everywhere because there again no real CG, and everything was levers like this. Slimer had 8 or 9 puppeteers on him at any given time, and they made 6 different Stay Puft suits and everything because you could only shoot each suit from one side or another. It was a lot of work for about 5 months.
And do they So I don't know if you've seen the new remakes or the reboots or whatever you want to
Yeah,
call them.
sure.
They the dogs, terror dogs are in that, aren't they? Are they all? I think they might all be CG. I think there's one in the
Yeah,
most
I
recent
think
one.
so too. I thought that the latest one that they did with the young girl
Mm,
was pretty good.
mm,
It was
mm,
a nice follow up to it because it's a kind of film that sits to itself. Ghostbusters doesn't fit into any kind of world category. It doesn't. It's just an isolated, perfect film. And even the sequels that they did after, where they tried to mimic it, it all just felt like they were just copying.
mm,
You know?
mm,
But then this most recent remake felt like a true honorarium and a good update. So
mm.
I like the way they pulled it off.
Yeah. Another thing I've got to mention, filmmaker friend of mine, Pat, is obsessed with the octopus in Goonies. And I've seen a picture of you from the shop with that in.
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming that used a lot of latex, did it? Or how was that created?
It was polyurethane actually.
Okay.
Instead of latex, we needed it to be able to submerge underwater easily and stuff. So it was like a rubbery skin with a very coarse open celled sheet foam on the inside of it that water would drain in and out of very easily. Um, but all we did was that cosmetic end of it and all of that, and the production said, "Oh, we'll make it move. We'll make it move. We got a rigging crew that'll do all that." Like, okay, great. So the rigging crew did it, and it looked like a cheap Ed Wood puppet. I mean, it looked. You can see it in the Cyndi Lauper video. It looks
Mm,
awful. I am so glad that they cut it.
mm,
But that's how we started on the show, was doing just the octopus. Uh, we were in the middle of Teen Wolf, and they
right.
came to us and said, "We need a 30-foot octopus in 8 weeks. Can we do it?" Like, sure, no problem. They called me No Problem Rob. Sure, no problem. All right, well, let's try it. And so we started doing that. And in the middle of doing that, they came to us and said, "We're having trouble with the artist and getting results on the sloth makeup. Can you come in and talk to us?" And so they ended up giving us the sloth makeup too. And we had about, I don't know, I think we had 11 days or something like that, ridiculous, to re-engineer and recreate the entire sloth makeup. Um, but that was great. It's another one of the really great ones where I go, yeah, I'm so happy to have worked on that. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, it's an absolute classic. Oh, one other one I was going to mention was Tremors. And the reason I mentioned Tremors is films that you've worked on that have got sequels, lots of sequels, for example. Do you watch those? And often what happens with genre sequels is they have less money for the sequel.
Right.
So maybe the effects aren't as good. Do you watch those and go, oh, or does it not affect you at all? Are you just happy with the version that you were involved with?
The surest way to disappointment is expectation. And if I have expectations of a film about what would happen later, then I'm usually disappointed in the sequel.
Mhm.
You know, um, I'm usually watching it to see if it fits into the world that the other film was.
Mm.
Does it feel like the same film? Does it feel like they belong together? That kind of stuff. Uh, yeah, when I saw Ghostbusters 2, I was like, boy, that looks. And I was kept thinking, this is ILM. These guys are great, and I know these people, and it was disappointing to me.
Mm.
You know, Slimer doesn't look as good. That kind of thing, and um, the two twin ghost things just kind of look like big bags of potatoes.
Mm.
And it's like, well, I would have had so much more high hopes for that, but again, that's my expectation of where things go and the way things are. I have to take my expectations off of that.
Yeah. And how much has the technology changed around this sort of
Not a
industry?
lot.
Not a
I
lot.
mean, we have CG now, so
Mm.
that's a huge whole entire world into itself. But But what we do as far as live action effects, the way we do it, uh, I'm still kind of doing it the way my grandfather did it, and he was taking latex and fabric and putting it over 2x4s and chicken wire and making dinosaurs. We're kind of doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're just refining it a lot more so that it looks as good as we can possibly make it.
Thanks for listening. If you want all the behind the scenes information that's going to help you with a career in a creative industry, then please do subscribe.